Welcome to Starbound, where every star tells a story. In a galaxy torn apart by war, can one soldier's quest for redemption change the fate of two civilizations? Well, let's get into the story. The stench of burning metal and scorched flesh hung heavy in the air, a grim testament to the battle that had raged here mere hours ago. Jal, a captain in the Vhonn Imperium's elite shock troops, groaned as he shifted amidst the twisted wreckage. His body was a symphony of pain, each breath a ragged gasp. His comm unit was dead, the once proud insignia of his unit now twisted amidst the debris. The humans had fought like cornered beasts, and Jal knew his forces had been routed, himself lucky to be counted amongst the living, or what passed for living at this point. A piercing whine shattered the silence, growing in intensity. Through pain-blurred vision, Shaw caught a flicker of movement in the ruins. At first he tensed, preparing for the killing blow, but what emerged from the dust weren't his own embattled forces. Humans, a scout team picking over the battlefield. Garbed in sleek armor, these soldiers moved with a practiced ease, their weapons held at the ready, yet lowered as if they expected no further resistance. Jal clenched his chitinous claws into the scorched earth, suppressing a growl. The humans would kill him soon enough, as their kind always did. Yet something in their movements gave him pause. They weren't approaching him with aggression, but something akin to caution. One human crouched, a strange device blinking in his gloved hand, and he motioned to his comrades. The shock of what happened next forced the pain from Jal's mind momentarily. Instead of an execution, the humans brought forth a compact medical kit. They worked with unsettling efficiency, moving to stabilize his most critical injuries, their expressions grim but focused. Jal couldn't stifle the guttural hiss of surprise. Surely this was a trick, a prelude to some brutal interrogation method. Once his condition was stabilized, they moved him, not roughly as he'd expected, but with surprising care considering they were handling their sworn enemy. The world swayed sickeningly as they transported him on some kind of stretcher. Then darkness descended, punctuated only by agonizing jolts and the humans' clipped, unintelligible orders. When consciousness returned, pain was a dull background thrum. Jal forced open heavy eyelids, momentarily blinded by harsh artificial light. Where was he? Instead of the scorched battlefield, he found himself in a sterile environment, his body secured to a table. Tubes and wires slithered from his armored hide, feeding into various humming machines. His initial panic was tempered by the understanding that he was still alive, and apparently not a prisoner, at least not in the traditional sense. The sound of footsteps drew his attention. A lone human male entered the room, his eyes narrowed with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Despite the situation, Jal felt a prickle of respect. It took courage to stand alone before an enemy, even a wounded one. This human carried himself as a soldier, no trace of fear in his bearing. "You're awake," the human stated, his voice rough but not unkind. Jal bristled, tilting his head to fix the human with his multifaceted eyes. "What is this? What do you intend?" He growled, his voice like gravel against stone. The human blinked in surprise, likely not expecting him to speak a common dialect. "We're stabilizing you. You were in bad shape when we found you," the soldier replied, keeping a careful distance. Shell snorted, the Vhonn equivalent of a disbelieving laugh echoing in the sterile room. "You save your enemies? What sort of tactic is this?" The human's mouth twisted into a wry smile. "I don't expect you to understand. Let's just say we're not like others in your Imperium." Confusion swirled in Jal's mind. There was an earnestness in the human's eyes, a lack of deception. This went against everything he'd been taught about their vile species. "You speak of your Imperium with disdain," Jal observed, testing the waters. The human's expression hardened. "The Imperium enslaves worlds, raises civilizations. We humans fight back not for conquest, but for survival." Jal found himself unable to refute those words, unpleasant as they were. Conquest was what fueled the Imperium, what had driven his own people ever outward. Yet here on this backwater colony world, the humans had resisted, even when victory seemed impossible. The following days brought a disorienting mix of pain and marvel. The humans tended to his wounds with a skill that unsettled Shal deeply. Their medical technology was shockingly advanced, far exceeding that of even the most developed Vhonn worlds. Wounds that would have meant agonizing death back home mended rapidly, scars fading with unnerving speed. Healers, technicians, they all approached him with the same dispassionate efficiency, but never with cruelty. The human who had first addressed him, whose name was Sergeant Michaels, Zhal learned, became a regular presence. Stiff and awkward at first, their conversations grew more fluid over time. Michaels was careful, revealing little about the human's wider war effort, but Zhal managed to glean slivers of information. The images the humans painted were grim, a vast and ruthless empire crushing defiant worlds beneath its heel, humans desperately holding the line, outgunned and outnumbered, but never yielding. And always, the unspoken question hung heavy. Were the humans truly the monstrous aggressors the Vhonn propaganda had painted them as? Each day that image fractured a little more. Zhal had witnessed the humans in combat, fierce and unyielding, yes, but not with the mindless savagery the Imperium would have him believe. They had saved him, risked their lives for a sworn enemy. One evening, as the sterile light cycled to a dim glow mimicking nightfall, Michaels approached him with a worn datapad. "I want to show you something," the sergeant said, his voice quieter than usual. "Your propaganda?" Zhal retorted, suspicion flaring. Michaels shook his head. "No, just watch." He tapped the pad, and a grainy image flickered into existence. It wasn't a battlefield, but a sprawling human city, towering spires and bustling crowds visible even in the poor resolution. And then came the change. A flash of light, a roar that seemed to echo through the datapad itself, and the once pristine city crumbled into ruins. "That was our world a year ago," Michaels said softly. "They didn't attack our soldiers. They struck at our civilians, with no provocation." Zhal felt an unfamiliar chill. This was the Imperium's standard tactic, of course. Break the enemy's will by shattering their home, but seeing it turned upon humans. A wave of revulsion washed over Zhal. He had served the Imperium loyally his entire life, convinced of the righteousness of their cause. Now the cracks that had started his confusion threatened to shatter his long-held beliefs. Had he been fighting for monsters all along? Doubt gnawed at him, each act of kindness by his supposed enemies pushing those doubts further. The humans treated him not as a despised prisoner, but as a patient in need. They offered nourishment, strange tasting but sustaining. They offered books and rudimentary language lessons, efforts to communicate rather than indoctrinate. One day, confined to his sterile quarters as his body continued to heal, Zhal heard a commotion outside. The door burst open and the base commander, a stern-faced woman with streaks of gray in her hair, strode towards him, flanked by several heavily armed guards. "Captain Zhal," the commander barked, her voice echoing in the room. "We've received intel that a Vhonn retrieval team is inbound. This facility can't withstand an attack." Alarm pulsed through Zhal. If his own people found him here, the repercussions, they would think him a traitor. Or worse, they'd exterminate the humans for daring to shelter him. "You must hide me, or eliminate me," Zhal rasped, a desperate edge entering his voice. "They must not know." The commander regarded him with a strange glint in her eye. "We have neither the intention nor methods to kill you, Captain. Not even our enemies," she stated with a hint of irony. A decision flickered across her face. "However, I do have a proposition, one that could benefit both of us." Her proposition was audacious. Disguise Zhal as a human soldier. The inbound Vhonn force was a small, snatch team, not expecting heavy resistance. With Zhal's knowledge of their tactics, the humans might not only survive the assault, but disrupt the retrieval mission entirely. In return, they would give him a chance to escape after the battle, offering sanctuary within a human territory. Zhal wrestled with the offer. It reeked of desperation on the humans' part, but also an opportunity to test if these humans were truly worthy of the mercy they had shown him, and perhaps to find a sliver of redemption for his past actions. "Very well," Zhal rumbled, the word heavy with conflicted emotions. The humans acted swiftly. They shaved his chitinous plates, painfully disguising his true form and fitting him into an ill-fitting human armor. They even provided him with a crude translation device, housed in a bulky helmet, enabling him to understand and communicate in their language. It was a bizarre, uncomfortable charade, but one Zhal embraced with grim determination. The waiting was agonizing. Every creak of the base, every flicker of shadow set his nerves on edge. The Vhonn were not known for subtlety in their rescues. Then it began. The sharp crackle of energy weapons, the shouts of humans, and the guttural roars of his own kind. Zhal, alongside a handful of human soldiers, was rushed to a defensive position. His augmented vision pierced the gloom, revealing the familiar silhouettes of Vhonn shock troopers pushing through the base's outer corridors. Bile rose in his throat. These had been his comrades only days ago. "Remember, Captain," Sergeant Michaels hissed in his ear, the rough translation grating in his helmet. "Stay close, follow our lead. Your knowledge is our best advantage." He nodded stiffly, his hand instinctively reaching for his usual sidearm, only to find it absent. It was replaced by a blocky human rifle, alien and ungainly in his grip. Chaos erupted. The Vhonn charged, expecting easy prey. Zhal found himself mirroring the humans around him, firing controlled bursts, taking cover, shouting warnings in a voice that sounded wrong, too human for his liking. But it was his knowledge of the Vhonn that proved decisive. He anticipated their flanking maneuvers, predicted their ambushes, calling out commands the humans instinctively obeyed. The Vhonn forces, disoriented and confused by the unexpectedly ferocious resistance, began to falter. And for the first time in his life, Zhal fought not for conquest, but to protect. In the heart of the chaos, Zhal found himself face to face with a young Vhonn warrior, her eyes wide with surprise and confusion. For a heartbeat, time seemed to freeze. He saw himself reflected in her segmented visor, a monster clad in the enemy's skin. Yet hesitation bloomed within him. He had the shot, could eliminate one more foe, but the humans hadn't killed him when they had the chance. He fired wide, the energy blast searing the wall beside the warrior. She flinched, recoiling, then scrambled past him, her weapon clattering in panic. A shout followed, an order to retreat, and the Vhonn began to fall back into disarray. The battle ended abruptly as it began. The remaining Vhonn scattered, leaving behind their dead and wounded. Zhal stood amidst the wreckage, feeling a strange mix of adrenaline and revulsion coursing through him. Humans moved around him, tending to injured comrades, their faces grim yet determined. Sergeant Michaels materialized from the smoke, a fresh gas across his arm. "You did good out there, Captain," he said, respect lacing his weary voice. Zhal merely grunted in acknowledgement. He felt anything but good. His actions had saved human lives, but at the cost of betraying his own people. What did that make him? The base commander approached, her usual severity replaced by a measure of, could it be approval? "You honored your word, Captain Zhal," she stated. "For that we are grateful. Now, about that sanctuary." The offer hung in the smoky air. With no place left among his own people, Zhal looked at these humans, at the devastation they had wrought, yet also the mercy they had shown him. "I will need time to consider," he rasped, the words feeling heavy, not just from the crude translation device, but from the weight of choices made. The commander gave a curt nod. "Time is a luxury we don't have much of, but the offer stands. Should you accept, there's a place for you among us." She turned and left him to wrestle with his demons. Days turned into sleepless nights as Zhal agonized over his choices. The image of the young Vhonn warrior haunted him. He had spared her life. Had he spared an innocent, or merely sent another unquestioning soldier out to enforce the Imperium's tyranny? He was a soldier programmed for war, yet the humans had shown him something else. The consequences of that war. The lives shattered and the world scorched by unthinking obedience to a brutal regime. He wandered the human base, a ghost in their midst. The soldiers eyed him with a mix of distrust and reluctant respect. He saw families huddled in makeshift shelters, their faces etched with loss and fear. He saw children playing amidst the ruins, their laughter a stark contrast to the devastation around them. These were the people the Imperium sought to crush, the innocents whose lives were deemed expendable in the name of galactic domination. One day, Zhal found himself in the base's makeshift medbay. The sterile smell that had once triggered revulsion now brought a sliver of twisted comfort. He watched as human medics tirelessly patched up the wounded. They did not distinguish between their own soldiers and the few Vhonn prisoners they had taken. The medics treated their sworn enemies with the same grim compassion as they did their own. It was then, as rage and confusion battled within him, that Zhal caught sight of her. The commander, The woman who had offered him impossible choices was kneeling by a makeshift bed. She was cleaning the wounds of a Vhonn soldier, her movements gentle, her face devoid of hatred. The soldier, young and terrified, flinched at her touch, but offered no resistance. Understanding hit Zhal with the force of a starship crashing into a planet. This was the difference. Even when fighting for their lives, humans held on to a core of compassion the Imperium had spent generations stamping out. He approached the commander slowly, his hulking form casting a long shadow. She looked up, startled at first, and then her eyes narrowed in recognition. "I accept," Zhal stated, his voice rough and unfamiliar even to his own ears. "I accept your offer." A flicker of surprise, maybe even relief, passed over the commander's face. "Very well, Captain," she said, rising to her feet. "Welcome aboard, or should I say bienvenido?" There was a faint hint of humor in her tired voice. Zhal blinked, uncomprehending. The commander chuckled, a low, throaty sound. "That's what we call this place. Bienvenido. It's an old word. It means welcome." He rumbled a low approximation of a laugh. It sounded alien, even to himself. The transition was not easy. The humans kept him under watch, distrust a constant companion in the first weeks. Zhal bore it stoically, understanding their suspicion. He learned their language with dogged determination, the unfamiliar sounds grating on his vocal cords. He trained alongside them, slowly mastering their weapons tactics, even learning a grudging respect for his battle prowess and strategic mind. There were nightmares, of course. The faces of Vhonn comrades twisted in betrayal, the screams of dying humans echoing in the darkness. But there were other moments, too. Moments of uneasy camaraderie with the soldiers he now fought beside, sharing quiet meals and stilted jokes under the unfamiliar stars. There was the quiet satisfaction of thwarting Vhonn incursions, his knowledge of their tactics proving invaluable in turning the tide of desperate skirmishes. One day, months into this strange new life, Zhal found himself summoned to the commander's makeshift quarters. She motioned for him to sit, offering a steaming cup of some foul-smelling human beverage. He took a hesitant sip, grimacing at the bitterness. "You've earned their trust, you know," the commander said, studying him with those shrewd eyes. "It wasn't easy, but they respect you now." Zhal merely grunted in acknowledgement. Trust was a concept he was still learning to understand in this new context. "And what about you?" she pressed. "Do you believe you made the right choice?" Zhal gazed out the window at the blasted landscape, the ruins of this human world that had become his own battleground. "There are no right choices in this war, Commander," he said finally. "Only the ones we can live with." He paused, the words echoing in the room. "I now fight to survive, and to protect those unable to protect themselves. It is enough." A small smile touched the commander's lips. "That's more than most people get in this life, Captain." Zhal, if he could still be called by that title, nodded. His old life, his old loyalties felt distant now, fading memories replaced by the grim reality of the present. He was no longer a Vhonn captain, nor was he truly human. He was something in between, a creature forged in the crucible of war, reshaped by the unexpected kindness of his enemies. The war raged on, battles were won and lost, planets burned under the Vhonn's relentless advance. Zhal fought with a ferocious determination, his formidable presence on the battlefield a beacon for weary soldiers. He became not just a soldier, but a symbol of resistance. The Vhonn defector the humans had turned into a formidable weapon against his own kind. Yet in his quietest moments, Zhal found himself in the medbay, watching the human medics tend to both friend and foe with equal dedication. Witnessing such unwavering compassion continued to be both sobering and humbling. There were whispers among some of his human comrades, concerns that he might betray them again, revert to his old ways. Some of that doubt would always linger, he understood. But Zhal knew deep down that his battle had changed. It was no longer about conquest or blind obedience. Now, he fought to preserve the embers of humanity within himself, to atone for his past sins, and perhaps to prove that even in a galaxy torn apart by war, redemption, or something resembling it, might still be possible. News of his continued defection spread even to his former comrades in the Imperium. His name was hissed with hatred, a symbol of betrayal and weakness. The Imperium put a bounty on his head, turning him into both a legend and a target. Yet Jean embraced his new burden. He would be their living reminder that there was a different path, a choice, however agonizing, to break free from tyranny. Years ground on, the conflict blurring into a relentless cycle of raids, rescues, and desperate gambits. Jean became a seasoned commander himself, leading small strike teams, disrupting Vhonn operations, rescuing prisoners, and safeguarding precious outposts in the far-flung corners of contested territories. He earned a fierce reputation among the disparate human resistance. They called him the Broken Fang, a testament to his origins and his unwavering defiance. Yet the war took its toll. Friends fell in battle, faces that once smiled with grim determination, now cold and lifeless. The nightmares intensified, the battlefield blurring with the ruins of his old life, accusations from former comrades mingling with the screams of the innocent on both sides of the conflict. One mission, deep behind Vhonn lines, nearly became his undoing. Ambushed and outnumbered, his team was cut down around him. Jean fought back like a cornered beast, but he was overwhelmed, pinned beneath a fallen comrade's armor, his own form riddled with wounds. The faces of Vhonn troopers swam above him, weapons poised to deliver the final blow. He closed his multifaceted eyes, expecting the searing pain of death. What came instead was a defiant chorus of human war cries and the flash of energy blasts. A rescue squad, led by Sergeant Michaels, battle-worn and scarred yet indomitable, surged forward, tearing the Vhonn attackers apart in a whirlwind of righteous fury. Back had been Veneto, patched up and haunted yet again by the ghosts of the fallen. Jean found himself facing Michaels. The sergeant's eyes were troubled, filled with a familiar reflection of Jean's own exhaustion. "It's not getting any easier, is it?" Michaels sighed, offering a battered flask. Jean took a bitter swig, the burn a welcome distraction. "The victories seem hollow," he rasped, the admission a heavy weight. "They always do," Michaels said, "but we keep fighting, because what else is there?" And in that shared grim understanding, Jean found a sliver of solace. As the war dragged on, its true toll became even clearer. Jean found himself questioning not only the Imperium, but the desperate lengths humans were driven to in order to survive. Desolation bred desperation, and whispers of terrible weapons, tactics mirroring the Vonn's brutal efficiency began to circulate through the resistance network. It reached a breaking point during a clandestine meeting with a human high counselor, a woman with haunted eyes and the weight of countless agonizing decisions etched on her face. They spoke of a final, desperate offensive, one designed to cripple a key Vhonn stronghold at any cost. "We understand the sacrifices required," the counselor said, her voice chillingly measured. "This war demands difficult choices." A sense of dread settled over Jean. He recognized that tone, the cold logic that justified atrocities in the name of the supposed greater good. It mirrored the rhetoric of his old Vhonn commanders too closely. "And what sacrifices are you speaking of?" Jean rumbled, his multifaceted eyes flashing with anger. The counselor met his gaze unflinchingly. "Orbital bombardment of the stronghold. It is heavily fortified, Captain. Breaking their defenses will mean civilian casualties." Zal felt a surge of revulsion. They were becoming the monster they were fighting. "The Vhonn targeted civilians from the start. Are we to stoop to their level?" "It's war, Captain," the counselor replied, a hint of impatience in her voice. "Innocence is a luxury we can no longer afford." That night, Jean did not sleep. He paced his meager quarters, the ghosts of dead worlds swirling around him. The humans had given him refuge, had shown him a glimmer of hope. But now, on the cusp of what might be their final victory, were they about to sacrifice the very principles that drew him to their cause? As the first light of dawn crept through the shattered window, Jean made a decision. There had to be another way. Even in the unending cycle of this brutal war, he gathered his meager belongings, leaving nothing more than a hastily scrawled note behind. Michaels, if he still lived, would understand, or perhaps not. Perhaps this was yet another betrayal, yet another layer to the cycle of violence, but he couldn't walk the path set out by the counselor. Joel slipped away from Bienvenido under cover of darkness. He became a ghost once more, a solitary figure moving through the war-torn landscape. The Broken Fang vanished, leaving behind a trail of uncertainty and doubt. His legend, however, would live on. A Vhonn defector turned human champion turned... what? No one knew. Perhaps a cautionary tale, perhaps the faintest glimmer of hope, a single act of defiance reminding both sides that even in the heart of darkness, a flicker of something else might endure. Joel's journey became one of solitary survival. He avoided both Vhonn and human forces, scavenging supplies and moving through shattered vestiges of former civilizations. There were whispers of him, rumors carrying on the winds. The Broken Fang turned renegade, a rogue warrior haunted by the ghosts of both sides. He ventured into the darkest corners of contested space, the dead zones where neither human nor Vhonn dared to tread. And it was here, amidst the radioactive ruins of a world long abandoned, that he made a shocking discovery. Hidden within the wreckage of what once might have been a research station, Joel unearthed a collection of data fragments. They spoke of a desperate gamble, a forgotten project, a weapon designed not to inflict destruction, but to disrupt the Vonn's relentless war machine. The project had been abandoned, its proponents silenced, the theory deemed too risky. Yet the incomplete schematics offered a tantalizing possibility. A way to cripple the Vhonn communications network, to throw their vast empire into disarray without spilling more blood. It was a fool's hope, Joel knew. He was one soldier, a broken one at that, against an implacable galactic empire. However, it was a flicker, a chance to tilt the scales, to break the relentless cycle of violence he'd been a part of for so long. With renewed purpose, Joel became a shadow warrior. He moved with relentless determination, gathering components, delving into long-forgotten scientific lore, drawing on both his Vhonn knowledge and the unexpected technical brilliance he'd absorbed alongside his former enemies. The humans and the Vhonn hunted him, both sides now unsure of his motives, yet he evaded them, driven by a fierce resolve that had been lacking for far too long. Time was against him, as always. The humans' desperate plan for orbital bombardment would be executed soon, pushing the conflict towards its grim conclusion. In the end, it was not a grand battle, but a solitary act that changed the course of the war. Joel, broken and weary, infiltrated a vital Vhonn communications hub. With the weapon he'd cobbled together, a crude fusion of alien tech, he unleashed a pulse that didn't kill but scrambled the Imperium's command structure. Across contested space, Vhonn fleets were thrown into chaos. Offensives stalled and the tide of war, for a brief shining moment, turned. He didn't know if his gamble would save the humans or doom them. The war machine would recover. Vengeance would be swift and terrible. However, it had bought them time. And in war, Joel had learned sometimes time is all it takes to find another way. His legend grew, a phantom in the wreckage, a symbol of both treachery and defiance, a flicker of hope in the darkness that perhaps somewhere a different path might yet be found.